current topic, joint lubrication. What is joint lubrication? We all, either human being or animal, we all are using our joint in movements. And the joint are subjected to a large load with maximum velocity, angular changes. But even with that high amount of loading as well as velocity, joint is not wear and tear within few days or few months or few years. So there is something in joint which can give a joint pain-free, full range of motion without any damage. So there is a mechanism available in the joint known as lubrication mechanism. By using that mechanism, joint can serve us lifelong without causing any problem. So before discussing about the joint lubrication, first we should know what is lubricant, how these lubricants work. So a lubricant is an interposed substance that separates the two conducting surfaces of joint. It means a joint is made up of two bones, and both bones are separated with a fluid-like material known as lubricant. So what is lubricant? And let us discuss the characteristic of joint lubricant. Surface dried cartilage pressed against glass exuded film under pressure. We can explain you like if two surfaces are separated by a film, whenever we will apply any compressive load, some fluid-like material comes out and separate both opposing surface in a form of glass exuded film. It means some water-like material comes out and separate both opposing surfaces. Second characteristic of joint lubrication is the coefficient of friction. What is coefficient of friction? Whenever we will rub two material, there is some resistance offered between movement of two material. So by applying friction between two material, if there is joint lubricant is available there, it can reduce the friction. So this mechanism is known as coefficient of friction. So whenever a lubricant is available between two opposing surfaces of bone, it can decrease the coefficient of friction whenever we will increase the load. And as much as we increase the load between two opposing surfaces, the coefficient of friction will be decreased because of presence of these lubricant. So it means the lubricant has a low coefficient of friction. And because we all know two opposing surfaces which form the joint, both surfaces are covered with cartilage. So cartilage to cartilage is having less coefficient of friction in comparison to cartilage and glass model. Glass is a very smooth. Glass, we can see glass is a very smooth. It is having least amount of frictional resistance. But when we compare glass to cartilage model, suppose if I am going to rub a cartilage over glass, it will allow a smooth movement of glass. But when in a joint or in a body, when one cartilage moves over other cartilage, the friction is less than the glass coefficient model. So coefficient of cartilage is less than the cartilage glass model. And the fourth characteristic of lubricant is synovial fluid lubricated better than saline in cartilage glass model. Saline means it is having a property of slipping property. But synovial fluid is more slippery than the saline fluid. So these are the basic characteristic of lubricating fluid. Now we will discuss about the different types of lubricant available which can serve as a lubricant. First is, as I can show you in the diagram, first lubricant is known as Newtonian type lubricant. Newtonian type lubricant means, like for example, water. It doesn't have any significant change when you apply any load or velocity. It will not change its property. A fluid which is available between two moving surface, if the fluid is having property of Newtonian fluid, it will not change its property. So Newtonian fluid is one that has a constant velocity with respect to shear rate. A common example is water. Whenever you will apply any force over other object by one object, if the water is present in between the two moving subjects, whatever load you are applying or whatever velocity by which you are moving the things, it will not be affected to the velocity as well as your load. Second type of lubricant is dilatant fluid, has viscosity that increases with shear rate. Second type of lubricant is known as dilatant lubricant. Whenever you will apply a shear load, shear force, viscosity increases. What is viscosity? Viscosity is a property, physical property of a fluid. Viscosity is the physical property of fluid. Whenever it means the resistance offered between two layers of fluid is known as viscosity. When the resistance between two layers of fluid is higher, we will say the viscosity of the material or water is higher, or any liquid is higher. And when the resistance between two layers of fluid is less, we will say it is having less viscosity. And if the resistance offered between two layers of fluid is more, we will say it is more viscous. Like water is less viscous in comparison to oil. And vegetable oil, as custard oil or grease, for example, grease is more viscous in comparison to mustard oil. Mustard oil is more viscous in comparison to water. So second type of lubricant is diluent type lubricant, and the example is silly putty. What is diluent fluid? Diluent fluid has viscosity that increases with shear rate. Whenever you will apply any shear over a diluent lubricant, the viscosity of that lubricant will be increases. It means more shear, more viscosity, more shear, more viscosity, less shear, less viscosity. So silly putty is an example. Silly putty, when you are rubbing a silly putty in between your finger, if you are rubbing your silly putty by less force, less velocity, it will offer less resistance. But when you will try to rub fast, by high load or high velocity, it will offer more resistance like a rubber ball. And the third type of lubricant known as thixotropic lubricant, which is the most common type of lubricant which is available in all synovial joint, is known as thixotropic lubricant. What is thixotropic lubricant? Thixotropic means whenever we will apply any shear load, when we will increase the load or velocity, the resistance or viscosity of the fluid will be lesser. So this is the most important type of lubricant which is available in human joint and animal joint. Whenever you will apply higher load, the resistance offered by the fluid will be lesser. So this type of lubricant is known as thixotropic lubricant. As you can see in the diagram, in the graph, the Newtonian type lubricant doesn't affect its velocity or viscosity by applying either load or velocity. But diluent type of lubricant, when you increase the load, the viscosity will be increases. But in case of thixotropic fluid, when you increase the load or velocity, the viscosity of fluid will be lesser. So let us take this example in human joint. Whenever your joint is subjected to higher load, the viscosity of this fluid is lesser. So the joint surfaces can move very easily and smoothly. So by moving smoothly, it can prevent your damage or wear and tear of the joint. Okay, now we have discussed about the different type of lubricant and its role, how they can work, and what is the basic characteristic of lubricant. By knowing about the lubricant, now I am going to discuss about the lubrication mechanism. How these lubricant act, mainly thixotropic lubricant, which is resemble the synovial fluid, how they are providing smooth movement to our joint. So what is lubrication mechanism? Definition: if we define the lubrication mechanism tend to decrease the frictional resistance between two sliding surfaces under load. Suppose if you take an example of knee joint, one femur is coming from upside and tibia, and knee joint has a lesser base of support. With having lesser base of support, and whole body weight is transferred through your knee. So whenever two bones are moving, suppose you are walking, so there is movement over both bone, and because of movement it will produce friction, and because of friction it can damage the cartilage. So how we can prevent the damage of that articular cartilage? It is only because of lubrication mechanism. There is something present in between two layers of bones, between two opposing surfaces of bone, which can reduce the frictional force and allow a free movement without damage. It is because of lubrication. So lubrication mechanism tend to decrease the functional frictional resistance between two sliding surface under load. So the surface, as the two surface joint are brought together under the load is high, spot the how your lubrication mechanism is going to reduce friction between two opposing surfaces. Till now there is no clear cut exact mechanism how your joint bear minimum frictional resistance. The scientist has explained different mechanism how your lubricant help the joint to allow smooth movement without wear and tear. And the first basic function of lubrication mechanism is first, the separating the two surfaces, however slightly, it decreases the risk of surface adhesion and injury. If there is any fluid is present between two solid things, one cartilage is solid and other cartilage is solid, and between two surfaces one water liquid like material present, and when because of presence of two liquid like material, when they move because of the liquid they will slip. But if there is no material in between, they can produce more friction and get damage. And the second purpose of lubrication mechanism is because of its much lower shear resistance compared to that of the joint surface themselves. Because I have told you joint lubricant that is thixotropic. Thixotropic means whenever you will apply high load, the viscosity is lesser. It means as you increase the load over joint, as your load increases, the fluid which is offering resistance to movement will be smoother, so it can allow more movement. So there are mainly two functions of lubricant. First is separating two surfaces. By separating two surfaces, they can prevent more friction between two joints, and second role is by making a film between two joints, they can be responsible for slipping the two bones over one another. So there are number of mechanisms which describe the lubrication mechanism, and the first one is known as hydrodynamic lubrication. Hydrodynamic lubrication is a mechanism that decreases the friction between two sliding surfaces by maintaining a fluid film between surface due to sliding motion. Suppose if you can take example, suppose if one material is contacted other material, and if you fill a fluid between two, whenever one material will move or other because of presence of fluid film between two, it can reduce the friction. So hydrodynamic lubrication is a mechanism that decreases the friction between two sliding surfaces by maintaining a fluid film between the surface due to sliding motion. When one object will slide over other object, there is a formation of fluid film between two objects and prevent the friction between two objects. Under the hydrodynamic lubrication, the thickness of film, if you take example of joint, whenever one object is moving, one is concave, other is convex, and one is moving over other, because of presence of synovial fluid between the joint cavity, the synovial fluid comes in between and it make a film between two opposing surface, and by making a film it can reduce the friction. As you can see in the diagram, both femur, take an example of knee, your femur bone and tibia is separated by a synovial fluid. When there is sliding motion, it is evident in diagram, when one bone move over other, it can cause a wedge shape formation of fluid film between two opposing surfaces of bone. This mechanism explains whenever there is mobility of one bone over other, and because of mobility of one bone over other bone, there is formation of film which can prevent friction between two opposing surfaces. But this mechanism is not able to explain the lubrication mechanism in static posture. So other mechanism comes, and same as this mechanism is also not able to explain the reduction of friction between two same surface. Like this mechanism can explain the reduction of friction between one concave and other convex. and because of one shape of concave, another shape is convex, there is enough space for the formation of a wedge shaped film, because one is cup, other is ball. So there is space for making a film. But where both surfaces are convex, if both surfaces are convex, so there is no space for building a fluid film. So this, and in most of our joint, some joints are having both surfaces are convex. So other mechanism has been given, other mechanism known as elasto-hydrodynamic lubrication. Second explained mechanism is elasto-hydrodynamic lubrication. What is elasto-hydrodynamic lubrication? Elasto-hydrodynamic lubrication is a mechanism that decreases friction between two sliding surfaces by maintaining a fluid film between the surface due to both sliding and motion as well as elastic deformation of the surfaces. As we have seen in hydrodynamic property, the fluid film formation is because of sliding motion of one bone over the other. It can cause the formation of fluid film. But in second mechanism, that is elasto-hydrodynamic mechanism, the formation of fluid film, he has explained, the formation of fluid film is not only because of motion, it is because of motion as well as slide. When you apply load, when you will apply load over one bone, because of loading, it means load is stress. When you apply stress, the structure will deform, and because of deformation, there will be space. Suppose you are approximating two convex surfaces, and when two convex surfaces are approximating, as you can see in the diagram, because of approximation of two convex surfaces, there is a fluid film formation because of elastic deformation as well as sliding movement of the two opposing surfaces. So this mechanism is quite better. This mechanism is explained quite in better manner than hydrodynamic mechanism. Hydrodynamic mechanism says that whatever fluid film is formed between two opposing surfaces is only because of sliding motion. But here in elasto-hydrodynamic, they are saying the formation of fluid film is not only because of sliding motion, but the film is formed between two opposing surfaces because of sliding motion as well as elastic deformation of two opposing surfaces. What is elastic deformation? Elastic deformation means whenever you will apply a load over any viscoelastic structure, the structure has capability to change its shape because in response to stress. So whenever we will apply a load over any convex surface, it can be the end or loading end can be flattened because of elastic deformation in that. So these two mechanisms, what is the basic idea in that? The high load carried by two convex surfaces deform the surface significantly on microscopic scale to produce a geometry of the meeting surfaces suitable for development of fluid film. It means when two surfaces are convex, there is no space. You can see in the diagram, one surface is convex, other is convex. When two surfaces are convex, both can approximate properly. So there is no space. When both opposing surfaces are convex, there is no space for development of fluid film. I have explained two mechanisms. One is hydrodynamic, another is elasto-hydrodynamic. The basic difference between two mechanisms, one is saying the formation of fluid film which is separating two opposing surfaces as well as reducing the frictional force which is responsible for wear and tear of that joint is because of sliding motion of two opposing surfaces. Whereas in elasto-hydrodynamic mechanism, they are saying when two, because that hydrodynamic mechanism is not able to explain the fluid film formation between two convex surfaces. So this doubt was explained by the second mechanism known as elasto-hydrodynamic mechanism, and they are saying whenever two convex surfaces are approximating or meeting each other, and whenever we will apply load because of loading, and loading can cause deformation of two surfaces, and so because of deformation there is some space is available for development of fluid film. However, the slow speed of body joint exclude the dynamic type of lubrication, including this one. So this mechanism also not satisfactorily explain the complete joint lubrication in all posture, either it is static or dynamic. Both we have seen both hydrodynamic as well as elasto-hydrodynamic mechanism both explain the joint lubrication, especially when one bone is moving over other bone. So, but we need a complete picture of joint lubrication in each static or dynamic posture. So, the third mechanism came in existence to explain the joint lubrication mechanism in all condition, that is boundary lubrication. It says boundary lubrication is a mechanism by which the two surfaces are in direct contact with each other. This mechanism is totally different from other two. These the first two are saying two surfaces are never going in contact. They are separated by a fluid film or lubricant, that is thixotropic lubricant. I have told you thixotropic lubricant is a lubricant कि whenever you will increase the loading or velocity over these lubricant, they will decrease its viscosity. But the boundary lubrication says the two surfaces are in direct contact with each other. It means they are totally cancelling the formation of fluid film between the two opposing surfaces. What are they saying? We will discuss. When two surfaces are brought close to each other, there is contact via the micro boundaries on the surfaces. It means there is some boundaries over the surfaces. They are attaching, they are in direct contact. So boundary lubrication says that two opposing surfaces are in direct contact with each other, and further increase in contact pressure beyond the elasto-hydrodynamic conditions causes the contacting asperties to deform plasticity and the number of contacts area. Whenever the two surfaces comes in contact, and because of load, because both end have cartilage, and cartilage is a viscoelastic structure, and because of viscoelasticity, whenever you will apply load over both end, they will deform. So because of deformation in boundary lubrication, the frictional force is found to be independent of sliding speed and directly proportional to normal load. It means whenever we have told you in elasto-hydrodynamic and hydrodynamic the fluid film formation is because of mobility, because of sliding motion. But here boundary lubrication says there is no fluid film, both surfaces are coming in contact together and there is no fluid film, and the contact is because of microstructure of both ends. So in boundary lubrication, the frictional force is found to be independent of sliding speed and directly proportional to normal load, because in boundary lubrication both ends are contacting, there is no fluid film. So when there is no fluid film, mobility or motion of both bone doesn't have any role. Whatever role is there, it is because of load. If you increase or decrease the load, will have different effect. So in boundary lubrication, the responsible factor for joint lubrication is only load. As we have seen in other first two mechanisms, the responsible factor for or deciding factor for joint lubrication is sliding motion. It means those mechanism is able to explain the joint lubrication during dynamic posture. But this mechanism says that there is no fluid film formation, both ends, both bone and both which form the joint come in direct contact, and they are making contact with some micro structure. An experiment was conducted in which a bone end carrying a compressive load was slid against the glass plate in the presence of either synovial fluid or water. It means the researchers has taken one bone which is having cartilage over one end and a smooth glass at other end, and they have produced movement between two surfaces, and the movement was produced, they have kept glass, then put some water over there, and then start sliding the bone over there, and they have found the resistance was least, but the increase in friction with time was attributed to a decrease in thickness of fluid film. But when they move the bone over glass for a long time, they have found that resistance was increases. The frictional resistance was increases. And they have explained this mechanism because they are moving the bone, and because of movement, the water or the fluid can be lost or decreased in the area and offer more resistance, which allowed increasing direct contact between the cartilage, and because at one end they have taken glass, other end they have taken bone with cartilage, and both are separated by water. But when they rub bone over glass, after some time the water disappear, so they are feel more resistance. So by this experiment they have explained two mechanisms by which your joint can be lubricated, and this by using boundary lubrication mechanism they have explained two further mechanism by which they will be able to explain the mechanism of joint lubrication. And first mechanism is weeping lubrication. Weeping lubrication means weeping is a mechanism by which a joint load is borne by hydrostatic pressure of synovial fluid escaping from the cartilage. If you take example, suppose if one bone, take example of knee as in diagram, take one bone is having, suppose tibia is a concave having cartilage over the bony end, same as femur. Whenever you will apply a load, because of load, the synovial fluid which is available within the cartilage of joint end, they will comes out in the space, in the joint space. See here, one bone is here, other bone, joint space. When you apply load, because of loading, take a sponge, example of sponge. If you apply, if a sponge is filled of water, when you press it, all the fluid which is present in a sponge will come out. Same as here, in weeping lubrication, the researchers has explained that whenever you will apply a load, because of the fluid which is present in your cartilage will comes out. And because we all know fluid has a property of hydrostatic property and dynamic. Fluid, any water is energy. Water, our body, our synovial fluid has a more than 80% of water, and water has a two property. It is having hydrostatic property as well as hydrodynamic property. So whenever water is in a static posture, it will exert a pressure over the wall, and by exerting pressure over the wall, it can maintain the tone of cell. Like we have seen, a cell is a basic structure of body. It is consisting of tissue fluid, interstitial fluid, and other cellular structure. But cell membrane is not shrink. It is having a tone. You can see a cell membrane is having a tone, and the tone of that membrane is only because of hydrostatic property of fluid. But as soon as the fluid comes out from the boundary, it will have more energy. That is known as hydrostatic pressure. It means when a fluid is confined in a boundary, it cannot apply more force. So this type of water force or liquid force is known as hydrostatic properties of liquid. But whenever the fluid will comes out from the boundary, as you can see in the swelling. What is swelling? Swelling is just coming out of cell fluid from inside of cell boundary to outside. And when, like flood, you can see in the flood, whenever the water is inside the river, it's okay, it's good looking. But whenever the water comes from the river boundary, it can cause destruction and damage. Same as here, whenever your cell fluid is inside your cell membrane, it will not have much kinetic energy. But as soon as the fluid comes out, it will have maximal amount of kinetic energy. Same as here, in weeping mechanism, they have explained, researchers have explained, whenever you will apply load over one bone to other bone, and because of load, the fluid which is available within the articular cartilage will come out and present in between the joint space, and because of hydrodynamic property of fluid, they will bear the load and allow frictional free movement. So by allowing resistance free movement, friction free movement, we can save the joint for wear and tear and damage. So because cartilage is permeable, synovial fluid can move in and out. We all know our membrane, cell membrane is semi-permeable. Cell membrane is semi-permeable. Fluid can come and out, go in. Suppose it is a cell, any fluid can come in the cell and go out from the cell. So because of permeable nature of articular cartilage cell, the fluid, synovial fluid, which is present inside the articular cartilage can come out in the space. Whenever you will apply load, it will come out and bear the weight. And whenever you are not applying load over joint, it will again go in the articular cartilage and maintain the integrity of articular cartilage. So in weeping lubrication is a lubrication mechanism by which the load is carried by synovial fluid is squeezed out from the cartilage. As I have explained you, by applying load, fluid will come out in the joint space, and water has a bouncy effect, bouncing capacity. It has capability to reduce the loading. So whenever whatever load you are applying over joint, because of presence of synovial fluid between the joint cavity, which comes out, which is squeezed out from the articular cartilage after application of load, so it can explain the static as well as dynamic behavior of loading without damage of joint. Next mechanism which comes out from the boundary lubrication is, you can see in the diagram, it is given in PPT, all the things, how fluids are coming out where you are applying load. The fluids are coming out from the articular cartilage, and wherever there is no load, as in periphery, you can see in the diagram, in the periphery, the fluid are going in. So by this mechanism, we can save the joint from wear, tear and damage. Next mechanism which originates from boundary lubrication is boosted lubrication. What is boosted lubrication? Boosted lubrication is a mechanism by which synovial fluid is trapped within the cartilage surface cavities, thus increasing the viscosity and load bearing capacity of synovial fluid. Boosted mechanism is slightly different from the weeping mechanism. In weeping mechanism, the researchers have explained that whenever you will apply load from all surface area of articular cartilage, the fluid will come out in the joint space and bear the weight. But in boosted mechanism, they have explained that whenever you will apply the load over joint, the point which is going for maximal contact, at that point the fluid will come out, and the point which is not going for maximum contact or not going in contact, the fluid will go in. So boosted mechanism is totally reverse of squeeze fill mechanism. In squeeze fill mechanism, they are saying that whenever you will apply load, water will come out from cartilage to space. But in boosted mechanism, they are saying, they have explained that whenever you will apply load over the joint or bone, the synovial fluid which is present in articular cartilage will move towards the periosteal layer of bone. As you are all aware about the structure of joint and bone. The bone is having outermost layer is periosteum, and all the epiphysis. What is epiphysis? The bone which is going to make a joint. The bony end which is going to articulate with other bone, and epiphysis is made up of a spongy bone. Then whole epiphysis is covered with your articular cartilage. Articular cartilage is viscoelastic structure. Viscoelastic structure means that they have capability to bear load, deform. They have elastic property. Whenever you will apply load, they will elongate and distribute the stress of load. So boosted mechanism explains that whenever you apply load and the bony end comes in contact, because of load application, the fluid of articular cartilage will not come out from the cartilage to joint space. They have explained they will go in opposite direction. It means they will travel towards the, suppose this is a bone, epiphysis fully covered with articular cartilage, then again bone and space. In squeeze film weeping mechanism, they have told when you apply load, fluid will come out from here to joint space. But in boosted mechanism, they explain that whenever you will apply load and at the point of contact, the fluid will go towards the bone. Towards the bone means from cartilage to periosteal layer of bone. So at that area, bone is harder and cartilage is softer. So at harder point, the fluid will be deposited and act like a cushion. So we can prevent the wear and tear of that joint. So in boosted fill mechanism or boosted lubrication, It is different from squeeze film. In squeeze film, they have told the fluid will comes out from cartilage to joint space, and because of presence of fluid in joint space, they will produce bouncy effect and load bearing effect, cushioning effect. But in boosted mechanism, they have explained that whenever you will apply load over joint, fluid will not comes out from cartilage to space. It is just reverse. They are saying fluid will go from cartilage to towards bone, towards the periosteal layer of bone, and periosteum is harder. So by depositing over the periosteal layer of bone, they will provide a cushioning effect over bone and prevent damage of bone. And the next mechanism is squeeze film mechanism. Squeeze film lubrication is a lubrication mechanism by which the joint load is carried by the fluid pressure developed between the two surfaces due to relative movement of approximating surface. In other words, as two surfaces approach each other, the fluid trapped between the cavities of cartilage is squeezed out, thus creating a cushion and providing a load bearing capacity of the point. As we have seen three mechanisms, first was weeping out mechanism, second is boosted, and third is squeeze film. What is the difference between all three? Let us discuss one by one. First is weeping mechanism. In weeping mechanism, they have told that whenever you will apply load, fluid comes out in space. In boosted, they have told when you apply load over the contact surface, the fluid will go toward the periosteal layer of bone and provide a cushioning effect. But in squeeze film mechanism, they have told that whenever you will apply the load over the maximum loading area or contact surface area, the maximum fluid will be deposited in that area. As you can see in the diagram, between all three, I would like to again explain all three. In first, suppose this is the joint. In weeping out mechanism, if you apply load, the fluid will comes out in all plane. Whereas in boosted mechanism, when you apply load, the fluid will go in opposite direction over the contact area. But third is squeeze film. In squeeze film, they again say the fluid will come out in space, but not in all area. The fluid will come out in space, but only in those area which is going for maximum contact. So this mechanism also explains the joint lubrication or weight bearing capacity of joint even in static posture and dynamic posture. And as we have explained, movement is a basic characteristic of human being or animal, and their joint is having less base of support. It is subjected high loading, and all joint is covered with articular cartilage, and they are one-time formed tissues. Articular cartilage is a one-time formed tissues. It means if it doesn't have blood supply, it doesn't have blood supply. And when your articular cartilage doesn't have sufficient amount of blood supply, so if you lose it, you will never regenerate it. So being a physical therapist or physical educator, for our sport personnel or our patient, we should try to save the articular cartilage which is present, because especially for lower limb is subjected to high loading. And for most of your ADL activities, for activity of daily living, you need your knee, ankle, hip or back should be properly functional. And they all are example of synovial joint. And they are having cartilage at their end. And if you lose those cartilage, they will not be able to perform their work, that is mainly range of motion and movement in precise manner and pain-free manner. So you will have pain and your performance will be decrease. So being a physical therapist or physical educator, we should try to save the damage of these articular cartilage. So having a complete comprehension of joint lubrication mechanism, how we can reduce loading over joint, how we can save joint, how can we prevent damage of joint, when we have a complete concept. Last mechanism, last one is squeeze film. Squeeze film mechanism mainly work when we are going for some athletic activities like jumping. Jumping is a mechanism when we are going for sudden, we are going to our knee or ankle or hip is subjected for heavy loading at one point. So in those conditions, whenever we are one area of joint is subjected for high loading, in those conditions the joint is lubricated by squeeze film method. But all these theories are not complete principle. They are not principle. the basic difference between principle and theory, principle is a fixed rule, like Newton. Newton has said there is every reaction for action and reaction. It is principle. It is true in all conditions. But what is theories? Theories are just a support. They are trying to explain whatever they find in research. Still, all these theories are not absolutely explain the joint mechanism, because joint work in living things, living animals, and we are checking all these things in non-living movement. So these theories are closely explain the mechanism, but it is not. It may be mechanism, it may not be. So there is much more research is needed to clearly explain the joint lubrication mechanism. And in recent nowadays, one new theory has come out. What is this theory says? When finger, they says in this theory, they says joint is covered, all joint is covered with particular cartilage. All other theories we have seen, some theories explaining the mechanism of joint lubrication in static posture. Some theories has explained the mechanism of joint lubrication in dynamic posture. But there is none theories available which can explain the joint lubrication mechanism in all type of static, dynamic, jumping, sudden change. There is no theories available which can explain the mechanism of joint lubrication in all posture. So research is still going on to find out the exact mechanism of joint lubrication, and there is one new theory comes out in recent 5 to 10 years, and they are saying this is known as new theories. And new theory, when finger press, they have tried to explain their theory with the help of a sponge. They are saying when we take a sponge soaked with water, when you apply pressure, as you can see in the diagram, when you apply pressure and movement, because some theory like we have seen in hydrodynamic theory and elasto-hydrodynamic theory, they were explaining the mechanism of joint lubrication by movement, whereas some theories are explaining the mechanism of joint lubrication by applying load. Some theories are explaining by contact. So this latest theory, known as new theory, they are trying to explain the mechanism of joint lubrication with the help of movement as well as load, because joint is subjected to heavy load in everyday life and every activities, as well as subjected to variable degree of movement. So this theory tries to explain the mechanism of joint lubrication in movement as well as loading. They have in experiment they have taken a sponge and apply pressure with a finger, and they have found when they are moving, so what happened, where their finger is going, but from the back of finger, the sponge doesn't have more water. If you take a sponge and you apply pressure with movement, you can see if you apply, where you release the pressure, it again filled with water, and where you apply pressure, fluid will comes out. So the new theory is plain. When a finger pressure is applied to a wet sponge, the water is squeezed out surrounding the finger. In addition, when finger is moved along the sponge, there is additional water build up ahead of finger and water loss behind the finger. When you move a finger over a sponge, in front of finger there is more water, in back of finger there is loss of finger. So the motion transport the water from behind the finger to the front. Same as in joint, when they are moving joint, whenever we move the joint, first come to orthokinetics. Joint motion, suppose if I am moving my elbow like this, or I am moving my shoulder, so this is not only a movement, there are always two types of movement. One is orthokinetic movement, another is osteokinetic movement, and no movement is possible without having two components. So when you want to move, suppose you're in any movement, when your arm is moving, so your joint will also move, and the movement is in this direction. Your one component of joint will move in this direction, and there is articular cartilage. At both ends there is articular cartilage, and when your head comes down, it will produce loading over and movement over this, and it can cause squeezing of water which is present in the articular cartilage. So where your bone is going, suppose see here, the bone is going down, so by applying load over other bone, it will bring more amount of water in front of where the movement is taking place, will have more water, and where there is no movement or no friction, no water. So what is friction? Friction means rubbing two things. Resistance offered between two moving surface. If you offer more resistance, there is more wear and tear. If you rub anything slowly, you can see if you rub two chalks slowly, you will feel less, you will see less number of particles. But you rub fastly or with high load, you will see more wear and tear. So in new theory, they have told that when one bone is moving over other bone, suppose for example, one bone is moving in downward, so in front where the bone is going down, so downward it will have more amount of fluid, and where there is no movement, it will have less amount of fluid. So because of presence of more amount of fluid in front of moving bone, presence of more fluid will act as a cushion. So if you lie on thick mattress, you will feel more comfortable, because whenever you will apply load will be distributed in, like you can see the Newton's third law. Newton's third law says that whenever you will apply load, it will be, there is equal and opposite direction, But Newton's law says it is true for harder thing. When you apply anything over hard thing, it will give you. But if you apply same load over a softer thing, it will not give you reverse, because of cushioning effect. Because of cushioning effect, the mattress is having capability to distribute the load not in axial direction. If you apply axial load or vertical load, the load will be distributed in this manner. Same as in water, because the maximum water is in front of the movement or towards the movement side, so it can reduce the friction and offer more cushioning. So because of more cushioning, it can prevent the damage. So this is the all theories. By using these theories, the researchers tries to explain the mechanism of joint lubrication. So the latest theory explained, that is known as new theory. They have a better explanation of joint lubrication even in static posture or in dynamic posture. Clear? So being a physiotherapist or physical educator, why this joint lubrication mechanism is important for us? Because as I have told you, joint is made up of a number of structure, but the opposing surface of both bone is made up of cartilage, and cartilage is one-time formed tissues. So whenever we will lose it, it will not come. Same as one more thing, nowadays we have number of arthritic cases, and if you see in the sports, if a person leaves this sport or a person is getting more and more injury in joint, he have post-traumatic arthritis, or we also known as secondary arthritis. So how can we use all these mechanisms to train our athlete or treat our patient? Clear? So as we know, cartilage is one-time formed tissues, and regeneration of cartilage is not possible. So the only solution for us we can only save the cartilage. So if we have a complete concept of joint lubrication, how should we use the joint, as we have seen in these theories, the mobility of one object over other, as well as the amount of loading, is responsible for the health of cartilage. Because lubrication is just physics. Lubrication is a mechanism by which movement takes place without having maximum resistance. So by having proper movement, proper lubrication, we can have these benefits. Whenever there is sufficient lubrication mechanism working, reduction of friction or wear by lubricant film, separating two conducting bodies in relative motion. So by having a good lubrication mechanism in joint, we can save joint for wear and tear, as well as we can save energy loss. Suppose in sports, energy is an important thing. If your athlete lose energy, he cannot perform better. How can lubrication mechanism help in energy prevention? For take example, if a person is not using proper lubrication mechanism, or his lubrication mechanism is impaired or affected, what happens? When you are moving to opposing surfaces, and because of smooth movement, your muscle don't need to apply more force, because it is the muscle only which produce movement at joint. And if joint is free, muscle need to apply less force, less torque over the bone to perform movement. But if there is no lubrication or there is more resistance, more friction between two joints, so muscle need to apply more force. Sometime one muscle, for every movement there is one prime mover. For every type of movement in body, mainly there is one prime mover. But if that prime mover is not able to apply maximum or sufficient amount of torque to produce bone movement, what happens? The person is going for compensatory movement or trick movement. He can use more than 2, 3, 4, 5% depending on the nature of work. He can use more muscle. So for performing one work, only one muscle was required. But when he is not able to, because of more friction or less smooth movement between joint, he need to use more muscle to produce force or move that joint. So what happens, if you are doing one work by using one muscle, you need less ATP. But if 5 or 6 muscle are used to perform a function, they all muscle will use ATP. Ultimately it is going to affect, because when you will need more ATP, and because of more ATP, your GI system should work more, your lungs should work more to bring more oxygen, your heart should work more to bring more blood. So when heart will work more, what happen? You may get hypertension. Clear? When your lungs work more, you may get dyspnea or labored breathing. So this type of problem may occur. Sometime your person, your athlete, suppose if your athlete is a marathon runner, if his joint is smooth, he can run smoothly by using appropriate muscle. But if there is any problem in joint lubrication, what happen? He will use number of muscle, so he can get tired easily, because he can utilize all of the energy which he has taken in form of food or any form of, but because his muscle is working to move because of more friction between joints. So lubrication mechanism very important for treatment purpose as well as training purpose. So by using proper concept of lubrication, we can train our athlete and we can improve their performance in better manner. Thank you.